leadership there and the terror infrastructure. Israel apparently deciding to embark on this operation in response to the days of threats last week on southern Israel posed by Islamic Jihad out of Gaza, seeking civilian targets on the other side of the border. Now, 3 days of road closures last week, and apparently back-channel efforts to get the Islamic Jihad to stand down. But in the end, the sharp message has been delivered here through this ongoing operation and ongoing strikes on jihad leadership in the Gaza Strip and the countermeasures against the rocket launching squads in the enclave as well. As recently as this last hour, we're seeing activity still, the Islamic Jihad firing somewhere around 600 rockets and mortars at this point at the Israeli population centers, again, just since Friday evening. Hamas, notably, has remained on the sidelines. Here's some of the recap of the weekend's activities.
Of Hamas and Islamic Jihad, I say explicitly, your time is limited. The threat will be removed one way or another.
In the studio, as we continue our coverage here by Lieutenant Colonel Richard Heh, IDF International spokesperson. Thanks for joining us, especially in person today. I know there's a lot of people calling on you today for comment, and you're busy, and you're also new in the position. We want to highlight here, so thank you very much for joining. A major way to jump into the issues here. But we're hearing the latest from the IDF side right now, officials saying that the objectives have been reached in this campaign. What were those objectives?
So we had one very clear objective, which we met 2 or 3 days ago, which was preventing an imminent threat. We saw very vocal voices coming from the Islamic jihadists in Gaza. We saw imminent threats moving towards the border, threats on our civilians. We took precautions and closed off the Gaza Strip, and we had only one objective, was to take away the threat.
At this point now, as activity is still going on, what are the goals for the IDF in this moment? Is it to find a way out of this fighting, or are there still targets going after?
The IDF is acting on our leadership's direction, and we're ready to defend our civilians. As long as the threat is going on, we're defending the civilians of Israel.
And what is the guidance from the government saying at this point? I mean, is the IDF getting clear guidance in terms of what to do at this point from the Israeli government?
We're getting very clear guidance. You heard our Minister of Defense to be ready for as long as it takes. While they're firing, we're acting. You can see our activity against the rocket launchers in the Gaza Strip. We're using aerial assets to hunt down the rocket launchers. And it's a very precise and focused mission.
Along those lines, I mean, some reports are saying there's new tactics being deployed by the IDF right now, even using drone swarms to target quickly rocket launching squads that appear. Is there something new being done by the IDF?
So the IDF is always advancing its technology. Also in our air defense, by the way, we have 97% intercepting the rockets with Iron Dome, and also hunting down the rocket launchers. It's always improving our intelligence, closing the circles with all our aerial means.
And in terms of back to the government directive at this point, saying, hey, be ready for as long as it takes. What are we talking? Weeks, hours? Where does the IDF preparing at this point?
We're ready. You heard our minister last night, for as long as it takes. If they keep firing, we'll keep defending our civilians.
It's sort of a responsive effort at this point. So if they fire, we'll fire, or there's still, aggressive, basically offensive tactics to be deployed by the IDF in this round.
Right now, we're defending our civilians, as I said before.
And in terms of preventing civilian casualties in the Gaza Strip, efforts on par with anything we've seen before? Is this IDF one of the top priorities of the IDF?
So again, our fight isn't against the Gazan people. We're very focused on protecting uninvolved lives. We're seeing the tragic pictures last night from Jabalia. It was, in the end, a misfired rocket from the Islamic Jihad. By the way, 20% of their rockets were misfires up till now.
What does the Islamic Jihad do that makes it especially hard for the IDF to avoid civilian casualties in Gaza?
They're hiding within, and they're acting within their civilian population. That's our main challenge, but it's an old story. It's been ongoing.
Right. Still, this is the tactics they're using here. They're hiding behind civilians. Their weapons are embedded in civilian areas.
Correct.
Also, we're looking at the Israeli side. We're left wondering again just how long this is going to go on. Will it ramp up? Are there reservists being mobilized at this point as well for a wider operation on the ground, perhaps?
So the reservists, you saw the reports for about 2-3 days ago. The IDF, again, is ready for any development. And again, as I said before, our focus is preventive. Preventive. Again, I repeat it again. We're preventing threats.
No, we all know the Islamic Jihad, and we've been watching this for many months, is not only in the Gaza Strip, they're in the West Bank. They have some major strongholds in the West Bank. Some of that activity arguably led to the tensions being raised last week, going after leadership there. What can you tell us about IDF activity in the West Bank right now against the Islamic Jihad?
So we've been doing, for the last few months, we called it counter-terrorism activity, which was ongoing since these treacherous attacks coming, I think, since March. Our focus was on the Jenin area. That's the hornet's nest of the Islamic Jihad activity. And we've been doing operations. Even last night, we obtained 20 militants.
Last night?
Yes, sir.
20 arrested in that area. And a last question for you. What is Hamas telling the IDF at this point?
So we're not talking to Hamas, but what I can tell you is our assessment is Hamas is really concerned right now on the humanitarian situation within the Strip. As you must well know, the power plant is out of fuel. So I think it's not out of their interest for this to escalate. But that's our assessment, and our government, and that's happening in our government. They're speaking and handling that event that's going on in the background.
And how's the IDF looking at, or even messaging, other players in this region? Maybe it's Hezbollah, maybe it's elements in Syria, Iran at this point, all looking in at this conflict here. What's the IDF message to these other enemies?
It's the same message. We will defend and act anywhere, any place against people threatening our civilians. And the jihadi activity is all the way to Tehran.
With Egypt in the picture now, or is there a likely ceasefire in the works today?
That's not something that I can talk about. I'm here to talk about the IDF activity, David.
Well, as we know, it's been ongoing here, air raid sirens as well. So, Lieutenant Colonel Richard, thanks for joining us here, and as you step into this position, international spokesperson. Good job so far. Keep it up. I know this is a major part, arena of the battles that Israel faces here, so thank you for joining. Thanks for shedding some light on the situation for us as well. We have another break to step out to, though, on our live rolling coverage here as again, we're covering IDF Operation Breaking Dawn. We just had our insight here from the spokesperson from the IDF. So stay with us, though. We'll be right back after another break with more analysis.
Hey, it's you again. Ready? Let's go. One show, a whole lot of perspectives.
He is part of the problem.
You want to talk about deplatforming?
People are losing their lives.
Not just what happened, but why does it matter?
I'd like to finish my point.
You're the one stretching terms here.
You could be a fantastic CNN reporter.
Join us every night, 8 p.m. Eastern on Global Eye. The global conversation starts here.
Imagine being able to see into the future.
What innovations will change the world as we know it? Join us as we meet the people changing our planet and discover the inventions shaping tomorrow.
Israel Business Beat. Sundays and Wednesdays, 9:30 p.m. GMT.
It's a living, breathing organism that pulsates through millennia. Touch it, listen to it, smell it, taste it. Experience the Holy Land like never before. Holy Land Uncovered, every Sunday, only on i24NEWS.
We're on the inside of political and religious passions in Jerusalem, breaking down the financial trends shaping the global economy, giving you key context, not just headlines, with the stories from Israel that touch the U.S. and those across the region with impact far beyond its borders. Catch the rundown where the Middle East meets the world.
Welcome back, and as we continue our live coverage, still day 3 of Operation Breaking Dawn. As the IDF named it here, going after the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, which has been going on for much longer than these last 3 days. But we go to our correspondent, Bianca Zanini, senior correspondent, sitting by in Jerusalem today. A lot of focus on the city and, of course, certain points of potential flashpoints, let's call it here. Bianca, Jerusalem definitely one of them. What's happening today?
Yeah, David, I want to tell you about something that happened just a couple of minutes ago and that has kept happening all morning. It seems that there are little waves or eruptions of violence every half an hour, every hour, and it always starts with some sort of expression of religiousness. So we hear one group expressing or chanting, religious chanting, and the other one responding, and within seconds, David, we're seeing a crowd gathering, people very much on the edge, people very much ready to get into this, and within seconds we're hearing screaming and yelling and tussling, and we just saw another arrest, or at the very least police forcefully removing one of the people here. And again, David, this is something that we keep seeing all day long, and it really tells you about the tensions here, how everyone seems to be on the edge, and it's really almost a reflection of what we're seeing large scale here, right? Two sides that keep clashing, and whatever peace we see does not seem to last very long and is very fragile, and even any sort of expression can break it, David.
Now, a lot of tension, as you mentioned here, Bianca, a lot of concern over just what could erupt, or on a wider scale, if those little, as you define them now, small-scale scuffles taking place turn into something bigger. Are police expecting larger crowds to converge there later today?
Well, police has been expecting that today, from this morning, has potential to erupt in a larger scale of violence. We see police all over the city, and although it's been rather calm, apart from these little waves of violence, David, we have seen an overall calm in the city, but it seems, like I mentioned, very, very fragile. And just a short while ago, the Temple Mount was reopened for Jews to visit. We've seen more than 2,000 Jews visit there today, but again, now that shortly they'll be leaving, and at these moments there seems to be a potential for more clashes. And again, of course, here in Jerusalem, in the Old City in particular, near the Temple Mount, the Al-Aqsa compound is particularly sensitive. What we saw last year was that any clashes and violence that happened here were part of the ignition for the 11-day conflict that we saw last year, and that's what police is trying to avoid this year, because essentially, if we see any large-scale eruptions of violence and clashes at these areas, it is likely that Hamas could decide to engage in the conflict, which they haven't done so far, of course, and that could completely change the calculation of this operation.
And Bianca, in line with the concerns there, we see some of it behind you here, the police presence. A lot's been made, at least locally, about the heavy deployment of police, the call-up of reserve battalions. You see a major police presence out there?
Yes, all the time. We do see little pockets of tourists coming and visit, and they keep asking us what's happening, what's going on. It's like you can't avoid it. The police presence is very, very heavy. But I do have to say again that it seems to come in waves. At some point, you can sit. We had lunch. We spoke to a group of tourists that seemed to be a little confused, a little bit scared, but still, willing to continue to continue their tour. But I have to say, it seems like things can change any minute now.
Such a major factor that you touch on there, Bianca. The tourist season in full swing in this country. It's been something we can feel on the streets, so I'm sure it's a factor out there. Bianca Zanini, thanks for the updates from Jerusalem's Old City. We go to Pia Steckelbach, our correspondent down in Sderot today, the town, one of the epicenters of issues so close to the Gaza Strip there. Pia, how do you describe the morning, the early afternoon already in that region? Hasn't been the quietest.
David, it is very, very tense, and it has been very, very tense for the entire morning, basically for the past days. David, we are here, and then we are hearing the sounds of detonations when the Iron Dome missile defense system intercepts a rocket that emanated from the Gaza envelope that was supposed to target the communities here in southern Israel. We hear the detonations. Not always do we see these kind of white clouds that emerge on the sky. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. We had a rocket alert about half an hour ago, and then, of course, we made our way to this shelter. They are widely displayed throughout the cities and communities here in southern Israel so that everybody has the opportunity to reach a shelter within only a couple of seconds, because here we are indeed very, very close to the Gaza envelope, to the border, and we only have a couple of seconds. Most of the times there's not even a real siren. There's just a voice coming out of a loudspeaker saying this is a red alert, and then people have to rush to the shelters as soon as possible. And then a couple of seconds later, really, you hear the Iron Dome interceptions and you hear the detonations. And of course, we have the, you could say, privilege to go here, but of course only a couple of meters or kilometers away. People in Gaza do not have that privilege, we have to mention.
Pia, how do you describe the flow of regular life down there in this region? I mean, it started last week being disrupted with the road closures around the Gaza Strip. Just how active are people right now?
Well, David, you mentioned it. This entire situation of not having a normal everyday life for these people started basically last Tuesday when Israeli security forces blocked certain routes, certain traffic routes. The train service between the city of Sderot and Ashkelon was paused, and normal life couldn't continue as normal. So this is almost going on for a week now. People here, and maybe this is a special Israeli characteristic or feature, after a rocket alert, after a minute already, people are going back to their normal lives, as normal as life can get under these circumstances, but people get out of the shelter and continue on their ways. And this is very much this Israeli feeling of life has to go on. This is also what the mayor of Sderot described when we had the chance to talk to him earlier. He basically said that Israelis are willing to suffer now in order to get a longer period of calm. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
When we see that the IDF harms those who want to eliminate us and our children, we salute. We're ready to be shoulder to shoulder with them and support them so they can continue. They harm us, therefore they must be harmed and eliminated. At the political level, it has been proven that it is possible to eliminate terrorists. And just as terrorists are eliminated in Judea and Samaria and other places, this policy should also be applied in Gaza. Stop the situation where no one is touched there. They should be repeatedly harmed.
Pia, thanks for the updates here from the south, of course, perspectives of local authorities as well. So we'll come back to you. Keep following the situation closely. Our Pia Steckelbach down in Sderot today. Again, ongoing, day 3 still of operation. Breaking Dawn, it's not quieting down yet, but we know there are some talks in the works here. We have Neri Zilber in the studio here to now analyze this a bit more. I mean, we're hearing at least comment statements that there's an Egyptian effort underway here to get the sides to agree to some sort of a ceasefire at this point. Is Egypt the key at this point? Are they the key interlocutor in this whole situation?
Well, if past is precedent, then they are the usual mediators, along with the United Nations and Qatar, we should say. Past rounds with Hamas, those have been the three main actors mediating between Israel and the Gaza-based militant groups. This time around, I think Egypt will have to play a major role, if only to get Hamas to pressure Islamic Jihad to stop firing rockets and to accept the ceasefire, which I think, as of today, Israel is also very much in the business and the interest of reaching. I think Israel has 3 days of warfare. Israel, I think, believes it has achieved a lot of the objectives that it set out to achieve at the beginning of this campaign. You end it now, the possibility of miscalculation or greater loss of life on the Israeli side and also on the Gazan side ends if you end it soon.
Yeah, we heard that from the IDF spokesperson here shortly, a short while ago, that the objectives have been met, that the initial threat that went into the weekend facing was eliminated. So it sounds like they want the conflict to wrap up here, at least sooner than later, of course. But the Islamic Jihad, Neri, is known to sort of take finances, support, even orders from Tehran, from Iran right now. We have Egypt mediating, other players in the region, pressure from Hamas. How does Iran factor into this, and just how much influence do we think they have over the Islamic Jihad? Are they giving direct orders at this point? What do we think?
I don't think they're giving direct orders. I think Iran is very far away from the Gaza Strip, and whatever Iran and the leaders in Tehran and even Islamic Jihad's overall leaders that sit outside the Gaza Strip, whether in Beirut or Damascus or Tehran, whatever they want is one thing. I think the rank and file on the ground are having a rough go of it over the past 3 days. I think that's undoubtedly true. Israel is the Israeli Air Force primarily is hammering them hard. They've lost two senior field commanders, or two most senior field commanders, in the span of 3 days. That's not a minor point. So I think the rank and file on the ground may want it to end sooner rather than later. I think it is important to emphasize that there is an Iranian connection. Islamic Jihad was built and funded and financed and supported by Iran from its very beginning over 3 decades ago. That's a big distinction from Hamas, which has always been allied but a bit separate from Iran. But I don't think Islamic Jihad, fire rockets or not fire rockets, I don't think that's a call made in Tehran.
Neri, thanks for that so far. But as along the lines of what you touched on here, Israel went after those commanders there. And top Islamic Jihad commander of the Gaza Strip, Khalid Mansour, he was killed Saturday in a surgical IDF strike. And our Hannah Rifkit has more on the latest top target in Gaza.
Just 1 day after the Gaza Strip's northern region commander of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Taysir Jabari, was assassinated, the Israeli Air Force takes out another PIJ leader, Khaled Mansour, on Saturday night by precision strike in the southern Gaza Strip city of Rafah.
I can tell you, we carried out another elimination of the commander of the southern area of the PIJ. This is a very important achievement, and according to all the data I have at the moment, we hit him and he was eliminated along with others, and in fact, the entire military arm of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip was thwarted.
But who is Khaled Mansour, and why was he assassinated by the IDF? Mansour was the terror organization's commander of the Gaza Strip's southern region, and over the last few days, he planned anti-tank guided missile and high-altitude missile attacks on the Israeli border. But over the last couple of decades, Mansour had a heavy hand in numerous attacks on Israel. In July 2004, he was responsible for moderately injuring an IDF Southern Brigade commander of the Gaza Division. Then in 2010, while serving as head of the PIJ's rocket unit, he claimed responsibility for the death of famed IDF combat major Eliraz Peretz. Then in 2015, he became commander of the PIJ's northern region of the Gaza Strip. From mortar bomb to advanced rockets, IDF intelligence says that Mansour led hundreds of rocket attacks on Israel during this time. He was heavily involved in building tunnels, and in May 2021, during Operation Guardian of the Walls, launched barrages of rockets at Israel and attempted massive plots against IDF troops and Israeli civilians. As Israel continues its Operation Breaking Dawn, so far the IDF sees it as a success as they eliminate Palestinian Islamic Jihad's top leadership for now.
Still with Neri Zilber here for at least another minute and a half here. Neri, they have to draw a little more attention to the political moment that it is in Israel. A transition government, a prime minister who has not been at the helm of any previous conflict per se. What kind of a moment is it for Israel, and especially in light of a potential ceasefire today?
potential ceasefire and also an upcoming election, David. We shouldn't mention that. It's election season, so while military and security issues, I think, are first and foremost in people's minds, in the back of people's minds, there's a looming election in November. I think undoubtedly the Lapid and his government have been viewed and seen by the Israeli public as having done a very good job over the past 3 days. If you woke up Friday morning and the public mood with regard to the government was very different. They were asking why parts of southern Israel were on effective lockdown with travel restrictions, roads closed and trains closed, and why, without having fired a shot, a militant group in the Gaza Strip was getting all this done without the Israeli government and military actually doing anything about it.
So now that narrative has flipped since Friday.
Fast forward 3 days. Israel has obviously taken action. The Lapid government has shown its willingness to deploy military force. You try to end it now.
See if they can wrap it up in a reasonable time frame here without any more collateral damage. Victory for them. Neri Zilbert, thanks for being with us so far on this special. We step out for another break here. We'll be back in just a moment.
Couscous. Couscous is the original national dish from North Africa, made of the best part of the wheat, called semolina. The couscous made in a special pot called the couscousière, and it's hundreds of years the same way. That's the traditional way to do it. The difference between the couscous from Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, in every place are different. The texture, the color. Today we're going to make the Moroccan version of couscous with curcumin, which is yellowish. I grew up on it. I was born here in Israel, but my parents are from Morocco. Since I was a child, I loved to eat it, only to eat it. During the years, I was so curious to explore it. I wrote a book which is called The Great Book of Couscous. There are more than 100 recipes for couscous. Some of them are traditional and some of them is like fusion, like the Italian version, couscous bolognese. Today I will serve my couscous the traditional Moroccan way with hummus in the vegetable soup. The couscous is a staple dish, and when you put something on it, it's like tofu. It takes the taste. There are different toppings, different look of the dish, different texture. Every time when I make couscous, no matter how many people will be here, there is enough for everyone.
Breaking news again, but there's always more to the story, especially here in the Middle East.
What's really going on in the region? Well, unless you're actually here, you can't really tell.
Join us here at the beating heart of the new Middle East
to get a true perspective on what's really going on.
Thanks for staying with us. If you're just joining now, we're the second hour of rolling, ongoing live coverage here at I24 News. This is day 3 of IDF Operation Breaking Dawn, focused on combating the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip. This began on Friday afternoon after days of tension last week when Islamic Jihad squads were menacing the roads of southern Israel, forcing the IDF to close many of them, again, for days on end until Friday, taking action. This is a live shot right now of the Gaza border region and IDF position nearby. You can see the artillery guns embedded in their positions. Quiet for now. Soldiers hunkering down in the shade as they do midday in August. Unless there's active fire, and of course, we'll keep drawing your attention to those incidents. In our analysis ongoing this hour, we go to our correspondent, Mohammed Najib in Ramallah. Mohammed, thanks for joining us right now. A lot of questions to get to. First on just some of the latest. I understand that the Egyptians are trying to push some kind of a ceasefire agreement through today, but the Palestinian Islamic Jihad issuing a statement, I think just this hour, saying that they've got a lot of fight in them still, that their munitions are far from spent, that they're still strong. What do we know about the status of this, or the appetite perhaps for a ceasefire on both sides?
Yes, the report says that the Islamic Jihad movement, the Saraya al-Quds, the military wing of the Islamic Jihad, used any Egyptian efforts to stabilize truce with Israel, because they said after the targeted killing of their leader Khalid Mansour and before Taysir al-Jabari, the situation get into a new phase, and they want to retaliate for the murder of their top military leaders. So it's embarrassment for them to stop the fighting and firing the rockets before revenge for the murder of their leaders, and that's a difficult situation for them. And they hope that Hamas at some point will join them. They can get some support from the West Bank, but right now there is no expectation that Hamas will join them or support them, or the West Bank will support them more than the protestations or peaceful protestation in the West Bank that called by Fatah in every West Bank city.
That being maybe the big question of this flare-up in the conflict is, will Hamas join? Will they open fire alongside the jihad? At this point, you're saying we don't have an indication that that's imminent. Looking at the West Bank, though, and we were just showing our viewers a skyline view of Gaza City, quiet as it is at this moment. So many questions, Mohammed, about what's the atmosphere in the West Bank. I mean, for weeks prior to this flare-up and attention again on the Gaza Strip, all the attention security-wise had been from the Israeli side on the West Bank in these IDF operations going after the Islamic Jihad there. What's the atmosphere right now in the West Bank since this operation started?
On the leadership level, there is a strong anger. The Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtaya will hold a press conference after an hour from now to talk about the consequences of the attacking of Gaza on the humanitarian level and the impact on the civilians. There are 2 million civilians in Gaza who suffers. Before that, the Palestinian Health Minister Michaela said that the fuel for the health facilities didn't allow to enter to Gaza for a week, and this makes the healthcare facilities will stop providing its service to the Palestinians in Gaza. And also Fatah called on its members to demonstrate at 5 p.m. today and tomorrow on all of the West Bank city to show support and solidarity with the people in Gaza. There are 265 Palestinians who have been injured by the Israeli fire, and 31 killed, including them, they are children and women. So that's to make the Palestinians and the West Bank anger. In addition to what's happened at Al-Aqsa Mosque today, when there are more than 1,100 Israelis came to Al-Aqsa, provoked some Palestinians who were there. The Israeli police prevented the Palestinian prayers under 50 age to enter to Al-Aqsa. So there is a growing tension in the West Bank and a growing anger and solidarity with the humanitarian side of what's going in Gaza.
We'll keep our eye on that situation. Mohammed Najib coming to us from Ramallah. Thanks for the updates on the status of the West Bank and picture at large. But as we are working to emphasize here, this ongoing operation, 3 days of it, it's between Israel and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, not the people of the Gaza Strip by a long shot. This is a very focused operation, and our correspondent Ariel Levine-Waldman has the profile report on just who is the Palestinian Islamic Jihad.
Israel's Breaking Dawn military operation continues hunting down the leadership of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. But just who are the terrorists who have had Israel under the gun recently?
You heard Sheikh Bassam Saadi, who is not just the commander of the Islamic Jihad here, he is a religious figure. This is a religious issue. This situation will not go on. We are awaiting instructions from Gaza how to respond. We are in this war with Gaza together.
Armed with rockets, advanced drones, and anti-tank weapons, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad is second only to Hamas in its power and influence in Gaza. And it is part ally and part rival, vying for control of the same turf. PIJ spawned from the Islamist Muslim Brotherhood Party in 1981 and immediately began to wage war against Israel with a group charter that calls for the total annihilation of the Jewish state. And it received funding and weapons directly from Israel's archenemy, Iran.
Our fight is not with the people of Gaza. Islamic Jihad is an Iranian proxy that wants to destroy the state of Israel and kill innocent Israelis. The head of Islamic Jihad is in Tehran as we speak.
Iran's fingerprints can be found on the funding, but also on the weapons the group is armed with. Iranian-made missiles and advanced armed drones that Gaza cannot domestically produce, and in direct meeting between PIJ leadership and Iran's regime. But the group manages to surpass even Hamas in radicalism, calling any political solution a betrayal.
We share the same Islamic identity. From a strategic point of view, there's no difference between us and Hamas, only a tactical difference. We reject participation in the elections because we believe that the basis of the Palestinian Authority is the Oslo Agreement.
Unlike Hamas, the PIJ rejects even long ceasefires as beneficial to Israel. This has put the group at odds with Hamas in the past, notably in 2019 after PIJ leader Baha Abu al-Atta was assassinated and the PIJ launched attacks on Israel, even as Hamas didn't want escalation. But escalation is the group's identity.
I don't agree with Hamas's idea of a long ceasefire with Israel, because Israel will only use the time to make things worse.
Now, 3 years later, Israel finds itself in the same struggle with its neighbors. Islamic Jihad once more calling the shots on the border, and Hamas trying not to bring Israel's wrath down on their own leaders. Is there a way out?
Now, for more perspective on the ongoing situation here, again, day 3 of this operation, we go to Rabat in Morocco, where our correspondent Reda Bennett is standing by. Reda, thanks for joining us. Always good to speak with you, especially on the big contentious issues facing us here. An issue we're trying to make clear to our audience, of course, is that this is not Israel attacking the people of the Gaza Strip. It's Israel against the Palestinian Islamic Jihad embedded in Gaza. Is that nuance something that's noticed in Morocco? How is this being discussed right now in the papers of Morocco?
Good morning, David. Of course, with a serious and stressful concern, the Kingdom of Morocco is having a special relationship with the both sides. Last visits of the Israeli sides here in Morocco and a lot of cooperation with the new era between Israel and Morocco. So Morocco is concerned by the security of the both sides, the Israelis one and the Palestinians one. This morning, an official statement have been released from the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs. I will just read some of the texts that the Kingdom of Morocco is following with deep concern the serious deterioration of the situation in Gaza Strip due to the return of acts of violence and fighting which have caused human losses and material damage, indicating the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, African Cooperation and Moroccan residents abroad. In the statement, the ministry stressed that the Kingdom of Morocco, whose sovereign, His Majesty the King Mohammed VI, chairs Al-Quds Committee, calls to avoiding further escalation of restoring calm for that situation that not degenerate, thus preparing the region from further tension which compromise the chance of peace. While returning discussing the position of supporting the rights of the Palestinian people, the Kingdom of Morocco affirmed that the lasting solution of the conflict between the two parties, Palestinian and Israeli, leads to the establishment of an independent Palestinian state living side by side with the state of Israel. Yeah, this is a statement. Yeah,
not avoiding the major issues. Yes. Impressive to see, not shying away from those issues. Sorry to jump on you, Reda. We are stepping out for another break here on the program. Reda Bennett is coming to us from Rabat. Again, thank you. We'll be right back with much more.
Esta semana en News 24, Cecilia Danot, politóloga y magíster en Relaciones Internacionales, analiza la percepción de Israel en las redes sociales de Latinoamérica. Detrás de Wikipedia en Israel se encuentra Wikimedia Israel. ¿Qué hacen y cómo lo hacen? El director de cine Jorge Gurvich estrena en Israel su film De regreso al Maracaná, un regreso a las raíces, amor y pasión por el fútbol. News 24, el magazine semanal en español de i24NEWS.
Discover i24NEWS Radio. Now you can listen to i24NEWS anywhere, anytime, for free. i24NEWS Radio is the audio live stream of the television network with world headlines every 30 minutes starting from 7 a.m. Tune in for top news, magazines editions while in the car, in your office. Join us from your smartphone, tablet, or desktop to stay connected in the Middle East and around the world. Don't wait any longer. Head to our website or mobile application and click on i24NEWS Radio to subscribe.
It sits up on the hill. It's really nice.
Ah, il y a Johnny là, des pieds.
Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us or joining us now on i24NEWS. Our ongoing and rolling live coverage of Day 3 IDF Operation Breaking Dawn, focused on hitting the leadership and, of course, the capabilities of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So much of their armament based in the Gaza Strip, that's where this operation has focused. And we go to our defense correspondent, Jonathan Regev, who's now down in the town of Sderot, just close to the Gaza border here, in the epicenter of so much fire from Gaza over the years. Jonathan, I know you've spent a lot of time down there covering it all for us. Today, I understand, just in the last minutes, really, yet more sirens, more rockets being fired out of Gaza?
Yes, more sirens, not specifically here to the city of Sderot, but other communities nearby, including also the city of Ashkelon, lying just about 7 or 8 miles north of the Gaza border. Yes, we are hearing perhaps a word of possible negotiations for some kind of a ceasefire. Whatever those negotiations may be heading on the ground, nothing is felt regarding that. Still the IDF operating within Gaza, still rockets being fired from the strip into Israel. There may be talks, but nothing of that is felt on the ground.
And we're showing the live skyline shot of Gaza City at this point. Just a bit of that smoky haze still visible on the horizon. Just 2 minutes ago, you could see clearly, Jonathan, where that rocket or rockets had come out of one of those the hearts of the population center there. So speaking to the nature of the difficulty of what the IDF is continually facing with the Gaza Strip, what do we know, Jonathan, about IDF activity? We know the rockets are still coming out of Gaza. What's the IDF doing besides calling for a ceasefire, it sounds like?
The IDF is specifically targeting Palestinian Islamic Jihad targets, and not only that, looking for squads which are heading close to the border and trying to fire rockets towards Israel, and specifically Palestinian Islamic Jihad squads. Of course, those rockets from Gaza are sent into Israeli civilian populations, and not only that, they're sent in Gaza from within Palestinian civilian population centers. We saw the result of that last night with those that killing of families with kids. They were killed from a Palestinian rocket sent from within the Jabalia neighborhood in the city of Gaza. This is the way that the Islamic Jihad is operating, from within population centers and into population centers. That is one of the main problems for the IDF, to target those launching squads. They're well entrenched inside alongside a civilian population, then there's always the risk that when you target them, you may hit them, but also the civilian population around them. As far as the Islamic Jihad is concerned, they don't care about that. We saw that last night, firing rockets from within civilian population and hurting them. The IDF is trying to spare this Palestinian civilian population as much as possible.
Good to highlight that, Jonathan. Our hearts in Israel truly go out to the people of Gaza, suffering as they are, with rocket launchers underneath their buildings, essentially, no warning sirens and no protection with their local authorities. Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Jonathan Reget, thanks for giving us updates again. Rocket fire still emerging from the Gaza Strip this last hour. But we go to Jerusalem right now, and so much attention on that potential flashpoint in this conflict. Our senior correspondent Bianca Zanini is standing by giving us updates this 2 hours. Bianca, I know it hasn't been an especially quiet day in Jerusalem, but not as bad as many fear. What's happening out there?
That's exactly right, David. The fears for today from Israeli authorities were quite dire. There was an expectation that here, in particular in the Old City, in the areas around the Temple Mount, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, that violence could blow up and escalate. And I mean, we are still only about halfway through the day. We don't know what's going to happen. A lot can still happen. But so far, at this moment right now, we're seeing rather calm, but as you can see behind me, there's a lot of press, there's a lot of police, there's the police presence, which of course speaks to the fact that we keep seeing these pockets of violence that keep escalating all day long. Now, they're rather small, rather contained, rather controlled. The police has made a few arrests, forcibly removing several men from different tussles, different I wouldn't call it fully clashes, but confrontations for sure. A lot of anger and definitely people on the edge. There's a lot of tension here in Jerusalem today, with everyone fearing what could happen next. David,
we will keep getting updated through you here, Bianca Zanini. Thanks for bringing us the latest from Jerusalem. And we want to bring to our viewers here some of the latest from Major Doron Spielman, IDF spokesperson for international media, made some statements earlier.
Of this operation from the very beginning have been based on restoring security and quiet to the residents of southern Israel. We've seen rockets falling on people all throughout Israel, heading from central Israel all the way down to the south. Children here are living in shelters. That's not a life. It's untenable that this would be the way people will live. This operation will continue until all the people of Israel can rest securely and safely in their homes, and their children can grow up in parks, not inside of bomb shelters. We have managed to neutralize both the northern and southern commander of Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip. Just earlier today, we blew up a terror tunnel that was heading from Gaza towards Israel that, had that been open, could have been used to kidnap Israeli civilians or kill Israeli civilians. What this shows us is that there are still active targets that could be used against Israelis, and this operation will come to a conclusion when that's been achieved. The original date that was set for this operation was up to 1 week. However, that is flexible, and the state of Israel from top to bottom, and I as a military officer know that we are here to protect the citizens of the state of Israel, and we're not going anywhere until that happens. This entire operation is based on the idea that Israeli civilians should be able to go to bed safely at night, and Gazan civilians should also be able to go to bed at night. And what is preventing this from happening on both sides of the border is Islamic Jihad.
Something you certainly don't hear from any of the spokespeople in the Gaza Strip concerned for Israeli civilians, is the IDF spokesperson right there communicating his concern for those in Gaza, as we try to do. Again, not a conflict with the people of the Gaza Strip, a conflict with the Islamic Jihad that happens to be embedded among them. But we are joined now by the Director of Communications for United Hatzalah, Lenora Tias. Thanks for being with us, one of the premier rescue services in Israel. So clearly a big moment for your organization here. What can you tell us? I mean, since Friday, when all this ramped up, the status of rescue and response efforts in southern Israel, where most of the fire has been directed?
Since the closure began, we distribute medical equipment to all of our volunteers at the region of the south of Israel to be prepared to any scenario. And right now, all of them are having these bulletproof vests and helmets so they can go out there to any medical and just be there with the psychotrauma unit even for all the scenarios of the fear of the citizens.
Yeah, you see the vest on you there, that armor, important. Obviously, shrapnel, part of this, and you go to rocket sites. Another one could be on the same trajectory. So wearing the ceramic vest, the helmets, important for our viewers to understand, part of the rescue operation at this point. What are you seeing in the local communities down there? How prepared are people? Obviously, this is not their first time at the rodeo, as we say. Does everyone have a designated shelter, for example?
As you said, it's not the first time in Israel, and the civilians are prepared for that. And also the volunteers of United Hatzalah know how to act. If something has happened during the ambulance shift, they will go immediately to the shelter nearby. And they have shelters everywhere. So we are ready, we are prepared, we can handle the situation. God bless.
And now, I'm talking about the people, obviously so concerned about. They're accustomed to this violence, sadly, but are you still treating people each day with acute anxieties, the stress that comes with being exposed to live fire?
Correct, especially the kids. No kids should suffer and be afraid, but right now the kids are afraid. They cannot just play and be kids in their summer vacation right now. So we are there, we are helping them. We give them all the psychotrauma unit volunteers to assist them inside the shelters and give them this a little bit of comfort and comfortable situation as much as we can.
Are people just staying close to shelter at this point, Lenore? Is that the best option given the heat and the threat of rockets?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you well.
It's the directive, and I mean, what people are doing, just staying near shelter at this point?
Yes, the civilians obligate to stay near the shelters. They're not allowed to go out. There is no schools or summer camps right now. Everyone needs to stay at home, and the volunteers will assist them if there is something necessary for them.
And at this point, like so much the rest of us, your organization on standby for this to go on as long as it goes on. At this point, you're prepared for anything?
We are prepared, and if necessary, we will bring more and more volunteers from across Israel to help the region of the south.
Lenore Tias, Director of Communications for United Hatzalah. Keep up the good work and stay safe. Thank you for joining us. And as we have to draw attention to here, we keep giving our own explanations of just what's happening here. But of course, anytime and for really any reason that Israel's engaged in battle with the terror leaders of the Gaza Strip, the world takes notice to varying degrees, as we're seeing here. But before that, get into that more, our senior correspondent Owen Altermini gives us a bit more of what's already emerged.
Come Monday, the diplomatic focus for Israel will come back here, to the familiar round table of the United Nations Security Council, where behind closed doors, ambassadors will once again hash out an Israel-Gaza conflict. Don't expect a game-changing outcome. The news will be the diplomatic temperature in the hall. And here, a preview from a current council member, the United Arab Emirates.
The United Arab Emirates has emphasized the need to restore calm to the Gaza Strip, reduce escalation, and preserve civilian lives. The UAE expresses its deep concern over the current escalation and calls for exercising maximum restraint to prevent being drawn into new levels of violence and instability.
The Emirati reaction is important for Israel, the UAE, a country at the heart of the Abraham Accords, and of Israel's push for normalization in the region. And in fact, the UAE decided to park itself on safe ground. The stances from Europe and from Washington.
We're actively engaged with Israeli, Palestinian, and regional partners to work towards achieving calm in the wake of these strikes. And we certainly urge all sides to avoid further escalation.
The U.S. government adds a piece about Israel's right to defend itself, as does the statement from British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss. A tweet from the German ambassador in Tel Aviv is especially friendly. The statement from the European Union gives a nod to Israel's self-defense rights. The French Foreign Ministry leaves them out. And then there's the reaction from Moscow, where Russia also has called for maximum restraint, showing that even in these tense international times, Russia and the West can agree on at least one thing. No one wants a war in Gaza.
Thank you again, Owen, for that. But as we know here at I24 News, the world's attention is on this country whenever conflict erupts, certainly with the Gaza Strip. And that's why we bring you our ongoing special edition coverage here throughout the day and night. We'll have it all for you. And it is IDF Operation Breaking Dawn. It began Friday. In case you've missed the news here, this operation began aimed at hitting the Palestinian Islamic Jihad leadership and their terror infrastructure that menaced southern Israel all last week. Now, Israel decided to embark on this operation. It was a response to those 3 days of active threats and road closures in southern Israel posed by anti-tank missile squads from the Islamic Jihad in Gaza that have been seeking civilian targets. That was 3 days of closures and apparently back-channel efforts to get the jihad to stand down. But in the end, Israel delivered this sharp message in the form of this operation. If you point your gun at us, you get shot. We're now again in day 3 of that ongoing surgical striking operation on the Islamic Jihad leadership. Again, not against the people of Gaza. So many around the world try to frame this. The ongoing countermeasures as well, so active, going after these rocket launching squads in the enclave that have continued to attempt to fire rockets into Israeli civilian centers. Just even in the last hour, it's the Islamic Jihad again firing around 600 rockets and mortars to date at Israel's population centers. Again, since Friday evening, Hamas, very significantly, still on the sidelines in Egyptian efforts underway to broker some sort of ceasefire. The Israeli officials saying that objectives have been reached. So stay tuned. We'll have it all for you here as it happens. This is the Gaza skyline in the background. I'm David Matlin in Tel Aviv. Thanks for joining.